Welcome to Your Time, Your Money, the show where every time we realize your time is just as important as your money. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a lot of educational topics that we cover, and today's a really good one. But, Matt, good to see you.
It's great to see you, man. I'm pumped about our show. I think we're doing something really special, and the more we do it, the better it's going to be. Obviously, we're bringing in guests, and we have some great stuff happening. But a monumental day, just like our first show we did a while ago. Well, today our first show is going to be live, and I can't thank you enough, and I can't thank our group enough. That our first link to our clients and the public is going out today, and they're going to get a chance to watch us. Now, it's going to be a little behind, but it's okay because this information is always going to be relevant, and we're going to try to be on the cutting edge of great topics.
Yeah, we're just going to continue with that trend. We want to make sure that obviously we're always providing pertinent information to a client, and today's no different. So let's jump into it. Why don't we get started? Your time,
your money. Let's make it happen, man. I'm excited.
Great. So today we're gonna talk a little bit about inflation, right? Keeping up with inflation. That's the title of today's show, and obviously it's very important because it's on everyone's mind. It's not just a word out there anymore. You've been hearing for years, oh, we're going to have inflation, or we haven't had inflation, or stagflation, and all these things. And really, we want to start addressing it because I think personally, it's the silent killer to a portfolio.
Oh, absolutely, man. It could really wreak havoc on a portfolio that's not prepared, right? And, a lot of clients, this is the first time they're hearing about it. And to that, it's important to know different pieces of a portfolio and to start learning words like beneficiary, inflation, rate of return, sequence of return. So this is just another word we're going to educate people on.
Yeah, and not only just understand what inflation is, but, really traditionally some of the best vehicles to help hedge against it. Yep. Because it not only affects a person during their retirement as they live 20, 30 years into retirement nowadays, and even longer for some people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With the modern medicine, man, made big changes. People are living to their 80s.
Yep, but it also has an effect on the beneficiary down the road as well.
Absolutely.
And if you don't handle it properly, you can really dilute a portfolio over the lifetime. Think of it like this. If you have a mortgage and you're paying a bank at 3%,
right.
How much do you pay that bank versus 4%? Just 1% more, right?
It's a huge increase.
$100,000, $200,000, depending on the mortgage. Well, that's the same thing that happens if you're not handling inflation, but the opposite way.
Right.
I mean, it takes away the buying power, right, of that portfolio.
Well, I mean, sometimes, Mark, what happens is it doesn't happen until it creeps up on you, right? And it's like you said, the silent killer, in the sense that when you're not prepared for something or you don't have a plan of action because you just weren't thinking about it, it becomes a bigger problem, right? And let's do a real world. Okay, so last year I had $100,000 in my bank, end of 2020, right? Now it's middle of 2022. What is my $100,000 really worth?
Well, if you're going to buy just gas with it, probably about 30 or 40% less.
Not as nearly as much.
The other day.
But it's just basic goods and services, right? So if I had $100,000 in my bank that I was spending, right, and now that $100,000 is probably worth more like 85, because inflation is just going so high, it's making my dollar worth less.
Yeah, and from a psychological standpoint, we consider it one of the worst risks out there, because when you get your statement in, you feel warm and fuzzy because your statement didn't go down.
Right.
Everybody understands the market risk. They have 100,000, they see it go to 80 with market return.
Oh my God, my money went down.
Right.
Yeah.
But with inflation, you don't, in those vehicles, you don't see them traditionally go down. If you have an FDIC account or something along that lines at a bank, you don't see that fluctuation. You get your statement, you get interest, so it actually goes up. Even though
I made $6, right? Woo!
Right. But your buying power may have went down more than what you made, and that's the part that over a period of time will really wreak havoc on a portfolio.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you said it perfect. So let's do a real world, right? So market's in very choppy water right now. Things are fluctuating and there's some volatility. So the account that I had at my firm, right, was 100,000. Now it's only 80 because the market dropped 20%, right? Example. But my bank account's still 100 though, Mark, right? I'm okay. Is that a good thing, right? Should I be worried about that?
Yeah, you definitely want to be worried about that because not only do you have the market risk, but if you leave the money in the bank, you're not taking advantage of perhaps the opportunity to dollar cost average into something that is going to outperform inflation over a long period of time.
Right. And that's, you literally said it. So like a lot of people are going to be asking as we talk about inflation, well, what's the answer, right? I feel like so many times when we're working with people, people are just looking for the answer, but a great teacher does what? What does a great teacher do? They ask the right question. And that will start the process of understanding, okay, wait a minute, hold on. I don't need an answer. I need to create my own question, right? So what's the right question here?
Yeah, am I too conservative is one of the main questions that everybody has to ask themselves. Am I too conservative, or do I have too much in fixed vehicles or conservative vehicles that aren't keeping up with the standard of inflation today?
That's a really good question, and this is where money on the sideline. And again, like you inspired this from me. You taught me this, and it was good that I learned it early on. You gave me an example where somebody had money on the sideline, sitting in cash for 5 years, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden the market dropped, right? And we took that dollar that was on the sideline that was earning like literally next to nothing,
Infused it.
and we infused it in the market when it was down to 18, 19,000, right? And then the market shot back up. And what happened to that sequence of return? What happened to that dollar that was sitting there earning basically next to nothing?
Yeah, you got a great return. And even if you averaged it down over the few years that you were waiting in the opportunity area, so to speak,
Yep.
you still averaged a really decent return.
Right.
But when you think about it, when did you move into the risk? You didn't move into the risk when there actually was as much risk.
Because the market had gotten so blistered by COVID.
You moved in at a period of time when there was a perception of more risk after the market had dropped, right? Yeah. I think that's important for investors to understand overall. It's, when we're talking inflation and we're talking looking at different vehicles and when do I move and when do I put time in there, if you think about it, if an investment is at its all-time high, that's when an investment usually has the most risk.
Right, but psychologically, it's really high. So
I'm making money.
I want to get more of it, right?
It's that euphoria, right? It's that euphoria of I'm going to make more. Hey, I hit. You go to the casino, you win $20, right? What happens? You come back, and before you know it, you put in 500 and you lost 500.
Oh man, right? But I won 20. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So same strategy happens with investments.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, people perceive risk, or more risk, I should say, after the market's dropped.
Yeah.
Right? Because now they have
oh my God,
fear. They're going back
fear
to that word.
For the four-letter F word, right? Fear. I mean, you're saying it perfect. So, like, I guess a lot of people out there, they're probably asking the question, well, what's my hedge against inflation? How do I beat inflation, Mark? Right? So, there's a couple ways, right? I'll let you start.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different ways, but traditionally, over a long period of time, large company value type investments have been a great hedge against inflation.
Dividend paying investments.
Dividend paying investments, things that are more value versus growth oriented. In economic stress and times, people will tend to go more towards a value type company, one that's not trading for 40, 50, 60 times what it's actually worth, and something that has obviously more value to it. But that has traditionally been a great way to hedge against inflation, because inflation isn't necessarily a 1 year thing.
Right. It's a perpetual thing.
It's a perpetual thing. So you're talking longer term investments.
Gotcha.
Or people have thrown out there, well, gold for inflation, or other choices as well, right? But just like any other investments, gold can go up and down.
And there's usually a premium when you buy it, right? So and a lot of clients have been calling, hey, should I buy some commodities like gold or silver? And my response to them is, yeah, you can. But usually you're going to pay a premium. You're going to pay a dealer, or you're going to pay shipping, or because you have to physically get it. And then what do you do with it? Well, if you sell it, guess what you're going to have to do? Pay another premium, right? Like someone's going to have to sell it for you. You're not just going to go walk around like, hey, here, buy my silver, right?
Yeah, and depending on the vehicle that it's in, you might have to be charged storage fees for it. If you start talking
collectibles, art, right?
Things along that line. So, I think the point goes back to maybe another episode of our show that we did, and that was diversification.
Huge.
And that diversification into things that will help protect against inflation is important. So there's no right or wrong solution, like one item that you want to be in.
Right.
But you want to diversify into inflation, things that'll keep up with inflation over the long term.
And I mean, it's funny because you made a point there. There's been some niche investments that have really came to light in the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, vintage wine, vintage automobiles, baseball cards, right? People have crypto has been it's a niche investment where people are starting to find a way and they're making money and they don't realize what they're investing in and they don't know the risks associated. But the truth is that there's some very traditional ways to hedge against inflation, and then there's some very modern ways to hedge against it. And there's no right answer. The key is you have to be educated and understand what it is.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit of why inflation comes about and
Sure.
Why it's important to understand where inflation comes from, because it's not always what you think it is.
Right.
Right. So what it is it's more money in the system than ever before. It's continually having money put in the system. How does it get into the system? A bunch of different ways. So for instance, not being political, but just going through the last couple administrations.
Sure.
We had TARP under Bush that put a lot of money into the system.
Yep.
Right? We had quantitative easing under Obama.
Yep.
Put more money into the system. We had tax cuts under Trump. Put more money into the system. And now we have stimulus through COVID and things along that lines.
Well, I just read an article the other day. It says the savings accounts of Americans are the highest they've ever been. People have more money in their savings accounts than ever before. And why? Relief checks, extra money from, I can't think of the word, unemployment. Pardon me. There's just been money, an influx of money, and now people are holding on to it because they're not sure. Oh my God, is this gas price going to get worse? Am I not going to have money because I can't find a job, right? But if we look at jobless claims, right? Jobless claims are at an all-time low. All the jobs that were there that we lost are coming back.
Yeah, right. So think about all this money being pumped into the economy, right? Fed has kept rates very low for a long period of time. It's allowed people to even borrow more and more money, right? You see that in the housing market, people buying homes they never thought they would have been able to purchase, with mortgages they never thought they would have been able to make the monthly payment on.
Right.
But when that happens, just like supply and demand, the more money you have in the economy, the less it becomes worth.
Right. It's a really simple narrative, right? If there's only one of these pens in the world, then it's a really valuable pen. But if there's billions of them, well, I just lost all of its value.
Yeah,
because they're all over the place.
Exactly. I remember seeing a political cartoon once about Mexico and their currency.
Right.
And somebody in that cartoon had a dollar and they were buying like this huge bag of goods, and then the other person had a wheelbarrow full of money and they were buying like one apple. But that's a perfect illustration,
it's an illustration, right?
of inflation. So what the federal government traditionally does is they tighten that policy, so they'll raise interest rates.
Right.
And now why do they do that?
Start to clear out their balance sheet.
Yeah, and part of the reason they do that is because as they raise rates, it becomes harder for people to borrow money.
Right.
Right? If you have a mortgage at 3%, you're basing your value that you're offering the home at off of your monthly payment that you can afford.
Right.
But now if rates are 4 or 5%, you can't offer the same for that home because you can't afford the monthly payment.
Correct.
Right? So by them increasing rates, they're making it harder to borrow money.
Well, and they're making it less lucrative to borrow money, right? So if I'm a small business owner and I want to take a chance on buying new kitchen equipment or buying new machines, right? Well, at 1%, sure, my margins are way bigger. But if I have to pay 5%, my margins are way smaller. Now I have to make sure everything is perfect. And if something falls apart, I got to default on the loan.
Yeah.
I can't pay it back.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point. Let's get into a little bit of how it affects business owners differently than the average individual investor.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think we're at a good time in our podcast where, for us, it's, that point where it's community spotlight time. And, one of the great things about community spotlight time is I have people behind the camera that give me
the clicker,
my clicker when I forget the clicker.
You know what? If I had the gavel, I'd be hammering the gavel right now. I want the gavel. We got to get that in here. I got to tell you that I watch this great Steve Harvey show. He's a judge in one of these like TV sitcoms, and he just crushes the gavel. I'm like, I want a gavel, man. I think that'd be great.
So anyway, community spotlight time. And yes, awesome. So, Community Spotlight Time is a time, obviously, as our viewers know and listeners know, is a time where we, just highlight different businesses in the area, make you aware of what's out there, businesses that we interact with sometimes on a weekly, daily basis or monthly basis. And today we have a great one, Springbrook Hollow Farm and Distillery. So you can tell by the name what they kind of make, which is always an enjoyable thing.
Well, I'm going to sidebar you because we know the owner very well, and he's a fantastic human being. But when COVID hit, they actually made hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
They pumped out like 100,000 gallons or some crazy number of hand sanitizer, and they helped the people in the state of New York. So God bless them for doing that, because I know we needed it. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off
Yeah,
there.
no, perfect. Matt Colucci up there, phenomenal. They did a lot to help the community during COVID. So
Oh, yeah.
we want to highlight them a little bit. They're up on 133 Clements Road in Queensbury, New York, 12804. Obviously, best number to reach them at is 518-338-3130. They do a lot of different things, though. They do like a coffee bourbon up there. I hear.
So it's cool because they did our cigar and whiskey event that we had. And normally I just go with the hard seltzers, just keep it simple and have fun. But I tried one of their bourbons. It was like a sweet bourbon, and it was unbelievable. I was like, this is great. It's smooth and it was easy to drink. And so, yeah, I mean, give them a call. They got some great stuff, a huge spread. They'll do catering. They do parties. They're phenomenal people.
Yeah. So once again, Springbrook Hollow Farm and Distillery. Check them out.
I love them. Yeah, great people.
So, getting back into inflation, that's where the cost of bourbon can go up.
The cost of bourbon can go up, and there's also another.
I wouldn't know. I don't drink hard liquor, so I
there's another flammable substance that can go up too, and that's gasoline, right? Like that's on the tip of everyone's tongue right now. So let's talk about it, right? So when the price of gas goes up, it's because of a few different things, right? Supply and demand, political pressure. There's a lot of factors, but ultimately, when the price of gas goes up, the buying power of our dollar gets beat up. Why? Because those extra dollars that we had, have to go where? To our gas tank.
Yeah, and the more you're spending, the more that comes out of the economy. Right? And that's the whole goal with trying to handle inflation, is to remove money from the economy.
Right.
And traditionally, you see interest rates go up to combat it. However, we've been through a period where rates have artificially been set
suppressed
low
like forever
for a long period of time. So even if there wasn't a ton of money being pushed in the economy, even just a little bit each year, I mean, we're talking 10 years.
Yeah, like trillions of dollars. You know
what I mean? That little bits have been funneling into the economy. So it's had to rear its ugly head. If we get to a period of time where there's hyperinflation, one of the things I always tell clients is, if you're old enough and you think, I don't know, you're a young guy, okay? You may not be old enough, but if you're old enough and you think back to the 70s and 80s, right, when we went through a period of inflation, if you look at the average house, you know whether it's built in the 80s or not.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You know right away.
It's usually a single-family ranch. It's usually, within a certain square foot, and they're all in a certain community, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason being, right, is because, once again, mortgages at that time were
17%, right? 18%.
I mean, we do a lot of seminars and webinars, and we asked that question, and I think the highest I heard was 19% from one person that was attending, a webinar, was that's what they were paying when they purchased their first home.
This generation of home buyers hasn't experienced that. I remember my parents talking about it. We got 13%. What a deal, right? And you start to think about that, and you're like, wow, like we've never experienced that. But eventually, it's going to happen. It's going to happen where interest rates are going to be up 7, 8, 9%, and mortgage rates are going to follow.
Yeah, and with combating inflation as they raise interest rates, clients really need to understand what happens when interest rates go up, specifically to the bond, perhaps parts of the portfolio.
Right. And they talk about safety, because this is important, because the diversification podcast we had, or the diversification show we had, is important to understand that when interest rates go up, the face amount of bonds do what? Based on their duration.
They'll go down.
They go down.
Which will increase the yield.
But the yield goes up. But this is why when we talk to people, it's so important. Diversify the portfolio, right?
Yeah. Well, you traditionally have seniors as they age, historically have went to bonds as they got older.
Historically, right.
And the reason being is they like the dividend. They like, they like the fact that
more safe.
Well, considered safe, right?
Right.
Although they haven't really been through a period of time of drastically rising interest rates.
Right.
And they haven't seen how that affects the balance in their portfolio.
Yep.
So, being in those securities is fine if you need the set income and you need that monthly check coming in. But that's very hard to stomach when you start seeing your balance go down behind it. You know what I mean? So
it's a two-headed monster. I mean, think about it like this. You made the comment right in the beginning about fixed income. So let's do a real world. I'm used to getting Social Security. I'm used to getting a pension, and I'm used to getting a check once a month from all my bonds. And that total is $4,000, right? I pay all my bills. I got an extra $500. But wait a minute, inflation over the last 6 months has been 7% every month. At the end of this month, I only had $42. What happened? Oh, by the way, I got to fill up my gas tank. Now I'm actually negative. Now I'm behind the 8 ball, but I'm on fixed income. So 5 months later, I've racked up $2,000 in credit card debt. I got to call my advisor and say, hey man, I need to pull some principal
From the bonds,
from the money that I have in the market.
which are now down.
Oh, why? Why are my bonds down? They're safe, Mark.
So now you're, if it's a mutual fund, maybe you're selling more shares at a lower price, and it becomes this kind of death spiral of your asset. So you're trying to keep up with inflation. You need that monthly money coming in, but now the prices are low, and now you're selling more shares than you ever thought you would.
Right.
And at some point, the math doesn't work.
You're going to fail the portfolio,
Yeah,
right? It's going to explode.
some point, your withdrawal rate might be 8, 10, 12%, meaning
Right.
you're taking out more than
More and
what
more
you
and more.
can reasonably take back with as little risk as possible, right?
Yeah.
So, it's important to understand why inflation is there, how it affects people, and then the other thing to look at, even within the housing market, is as people have to go and get mortgages for higher rates, they will have to start offering less money for the houses that are out there.
Well, that's a natural combination. It's like the bond face amount with interest rates, right? That's got to happen. If interest rates go up, the value of homes do what naturally?
Yeah, they'll eventually
go down.
because it's all based off of that person that's buying its monthly payment.
Correct.
What can I afford a month?
I can't afford this, so guess what? The house value is going to go down. And I mean, this is where I'm going to urge people out there that are making ridiculous offers on houses, stop. Because the worse that problem gets, the worse you're making the problem, right? I saw a house the other day go for sale. It listed at $289. It sold for $330. The people buying that house, you are part of creating that problem because of the greed, because of whatever the factor might be. They can rent it out. Well, here's the problem: is you rent that house out, the people living in it, their job isn't going to make them enough money to pay the potential rent. Then you're not going to have renters, and then you're going to default on the loan.
Yeah, or you look at the long-term value of that home.
Right.
If the home value goes down, you might end up inversing it. You might end up owing more than what the value of the property is.
So let's say the real value is $290, and we paid $330 because it's such a hot market, right? This is where, as a buyer, and you have to talk to your advisor. Don't just make a snap decision. Really talk about, okay, so I bought this house for $330. It's really only worth $280, and now interest rates go up. Now market's only worth $240.
And all the buyers out there can only afford $240.
Ooh, okay, so I bought it for $330. It's worth $240. My mortgage is set for $330 though. So I can't sell it. I have to keep the mortgage and I can't rent it. Uh-oh. Now I default. Right? And this is
not a situation you want to be in.
This was, a little bit of the part of the housing crisis back in 2008, not really to the extent, because that was more based on derivatives, right? And the selling of mortgage-backed securities. But, it started with giving loans to buyers that potentially shouldn't have had those loans.
Yeah, and the reason we bring that up is we are on the topic of inflation, but inflation is kind of sometimes that first domino.
Yeah.
And it starts all these other problems down the road.
Sure.
From income in retirement to, like we're saying, housing, to the housing market, and even just the cost of goods across the board.
Goods are going to get more expensive and your dollar is going to get weaker.
Yeah, paying for an extra tank of gas occasionally, right, for the individual person, that really affects them. But now imagine you're a trucker.
Yeah.
And imagine you're
running a small business as a trucker. You're moving one load after the next.
And most people don't realize that, when you fill up those large tanks on the side of a truck, before the gas prices went up, most truckers were paying maybe $500 to $600 to fill up those huge tanks.
Right.
Now they're up to about $1,000.
And that's cutting into their margins.
Yeah, and once that starts cutting into their margin, what do they have to do? They have to raise their shipping costs. Everything in the country shipped from
shipping
one
costs
point to
go
another.
up, right? Shipping costs go up,
Right.
then the value of goods get.
Yep, and then all of a sudden you're seeing it in your wallet now, because now when you normally go and spend $200 for groceries at Walmart or ShopRite or whatever store you're shopping at,
Sure.
now it's $400.
I always like to play the bag game, right? And we've done this for a while in my house. How many bags do you get for the money you spend? right? And I've
Well,
seen
we're in New York State. We don't get any bags unless we spend money.
we
on
got to bring the bags
bags.
with us. So I did go to Price Chopper one time, and I had to get Dora the Explorer bags. So that was fun coming home with pink and yellow Dora the Explorer bags. I got a lot of weird looks walking through the store with those. But no, I love Dora the Explorer. It's always fun. But I always do the bag
Where
game.
were you going with this?
Well, I was always doing the bag game is the fact that $400 gets you how many bags of stuff from the grocery store. And I remember because every couple of weeks I'll look and it's like, hey, we got like one less bag. We got a little bit less in this bag. And now it's like, oh my God, $400 buys you 4 bags of stuff. You're like, what did I spend $400 on? You know? Yeah. That's a real test to do in the household.
So, let's focus on maybe some things that clients can do to combat inflation.
Okay.
Some very simple strategies that they can do. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time in different episodes talking about retirement planning strategies.
Sure.
Right. And our goal is never to be 100% in one avenue, in one investment, drawing off of that investment.
Yep.
So, the simple solution sometimes to combat inflation in a household is just to increase your income.
Yeah.
Right. And if possible, start maybe some streams of income that you were going to put off. Perhaps maybe you weren't going to touch a certain account till you needed it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you look at what that investment's in and say, hey, you know what? Can this provide a dividend? Can this provide interest? Can this provide some type of fixed income payment to give me that additional bump that I need?
And I feel like you really need to drill down on that, Mark. What does it mean to have your money work for you? Well, let's do just a quick example. Triple tax exempt municipal bonds, right? If I take 10 grand and I buy some municipal bonds and I live in New York State, let's say, well, that 10 grand is going to go to work for me, right? It's going to create income for me. Now, yes, the face on those bonds might fluctuate with interest rates and it's not perfect for everybody, but those $10,000 now go to work and create income that's triple tax exempt if I live in New York and I buy New York State municipal bonds. But instead, that $10,000 could be sitting in my checking account. If I'm not spending it, then what the heck should I be doing with it, right? Just a little example on what you potentially could do to create income, because that 10 grand could create enough income to fill up your truck tank once a month.
Yeah, and the worst thing that can happen with inflation is that you need more income, but you haven't structured your portfolio to where you can dip into more income.
Right, and if you do, you got to sell low.
Exactly, and then you risk longevity risk, outliving your income.
Yeah.
Nowadays, people are living well into their 90s. Even 100 years old is more common nowadays than ever before.
Sure.
And if you start that trend early with inflation, so imagine people retiring today.
Yeah.
That haven't done the plan. They don't have the buckets, so to speak, that are meant for intermediate or long term.
Broken out,
that are
right?
set out into investments that have more growth opportunity in them.
Yeah.
And those investors are now, in their first couple of years of retirement, taking more money than they ever thought they needed out of their retirement program.
Or they're working because they have to. Right? You retire. Hey, I retire, but I'm working already. I'm the greeter at Walmart, or I'm working at Lowe's because I get a discount to do home upgrades. Like that's not the point of retiring. The point of retiring is to enjoy, and not have to kill yourself.
Yeah, and delving back down onto that point, one of the best ways to help combat inflation in any type of portfolio is by looking at your money as different pots.
Right.
One of the things we bring up in seminars a lot of time is your money should be like an army, right? It should be doing different things. If you have an army where it's just all people on the front lines, but there's nobody bringing you ammo, there's no medics,
no supply, right?
People,
no food, right.
There's no logistics behind it.
Right.
That army's not going to be as effective as a fully trained, integrated army with all different,
tanks and aircrafts and ships and
mechanics, everything, right? If you look at your money like that, is your money, and I'm posing this question to our viewers and our listeners, is your money broken out for different things? Or, is it broken out for different times?
Or is it just all sitting in your checking account and your 401k, and that's your two choices?
Exactly. And not only is it in your 401k or an IRA, is it all being managed differently?
Right.
Meaning, if you have $1 million in your 401k, you don't need $1 million today.
Right.
I mean, typically, right?
Typically.
Some people, but if you have $1 million in your 401k, there's a portion that's going to be there for years 20, 25, 30 years down the road. That money needs to be managed separately in a different manner.
Right. And I mean, I'll give you an example. I have these great people I'm working with, and there's some money that moved, and it's obviously gone down, the variable part, but then we have a fixed income part that's built for income only. And you get the phone call, I'm worried, the market's moving. And it's like, well, wait, here's why we bucketed this portion for income when you retire, because the other portion needs to be able to grow for 10 years before you touch it.
Yeah, that's money that can ride down a cycle. It can ride out downturns in the market.
Sure.
It's money that can be dollar cost averaged into.
Yep.
Right? That you can take advantage when the market drops. And it's money over the long period of time, if invested properly, can really beat inflation.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to build into your portfolio, is those buckets and those strategies that not only give you the ability to drive more income during inflation, but also beat it over the long term.
Yep. And it's about a state of mind that you got to get rid of your fear, and you got to make decisions that make sense, logical sense with your advisor. And just make sure you're being thoughtful. And that's really a key takeaway is are you making logical decisions? That's the true question we're asking here, right? When you look at your portfolio, I think the Army analogy is actually a very good one. And I didn't ever think about that before. And, some people aren't very Army understand. They don't understand the logistics behind feeding 10,000 people, right? What it looks like.
Well, they
right?
do now. If you watch the Russian
Right,
army stall out halfway.
Yeah, that's basically what happened, right? I mean, that's probably on the tip of everyone's tongues right now, is what's Russia going to have to do with this? But the truth is how do I make a good decision? Is really a better question, and decision should be made with someone that has seen it, right? And I keep going back to this doctor analogy, right? If you were hurt. The question, if you were hurt, where would you go? Would you go to a mechanic?
Yeah. Well, you're not gonna.
Would you go to your dad?
Not if you want to get better.
Would you go to the water cooler? Hey, I dislocated my shoulder. I'm going to go to the water cooler and see what they have to say. No, you would go to the doctor. Well, then why the heck would you go to the water cooler or your mechanic or your postman if you had a financial issue? Because that is normally what happens. It's almost like, have you ever experienced someone that needed to make a decision and they talk to 20 people, and on the 20th person, that person says what they want to hear, and then they go with that person, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They know what they want to hear, so they find the person, they seek that person out.
Or they go with the last person because they're exhausted and they don't want to put any more effort.
That's called the secondary effect, right? The secondary effect is, I'm going to remember the last thing I heard and I'll go with that answer. Don't let that happen to you. If you're a good consumer and you're a good client, you'll actually have a very good in-depth conversation, a trustworthy conversation with your advisor. Listen, I'm never right all the time, okay? I make mistakes just like you. We're human. But the key is, time is an advisor's best friend. And having an honest conversation and relationship is more important than any rate of return, tie, or suit.
Yeah, because we know right now there's people getting ready to retire.
Yeah.
And they're nervous about it because they see the cost of goods going up and they don't think that they can retire today. And a lot of those people can retire, but nobody showed them how to.
How do I retire?
And to take that fear away for them.
The mountain, right? We could do the mountain analogy. I've climbed the mountain, I've saved all my money, and I'm at the top. Well, guess what you got to do?
You got to get down.
You got to get down now. How do I do that? Let's get on the sled. Here we go, right? Chevy Chase, we're going to shine it up. We're going to hit the Walmart parking lot at 200 miles an hour, So, I mean, I think we hit on a lot of good topics, Mark, and I'm going to just be honest again with our viewers. We're hard workers here. We care. I mean, literally it's 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. We're still cooking, and we want people to know we're here to help. I think that's the most important thing we want to convey.
Yeah, and let's I think we've done a good job of presenting what inflation is.
Yeah.
I think we talked, in recap, some simple things people can do. They can dip into other sources to increase their income temporarily.
Sure.
They can manage their money more for long-term pots, so to speak.
They could.
To outperform inflation. They can look at other vehicles, perhaps, large cap value, diversification, commodities, things along that lines. There's a ton of different options that you should discuss with your advisor.
Yep.
And I think the other recap that we need to focus on is that if you're not sure whether you can retire, if you're not sure, whether inflation is allowing you to retire, you should really sit down with somebody. And we'd love to sit down with you,
just have a conversation,
explain to you the nuances of inflation, what your income streams look like, what you can support with your assets.
I think a big takeaway, right? There's a lot of advisors out there or a lot of attorneys out there that require you to pay a fee just to walk through the door. Right? Let's really digress on that for a second. The way we've run our practice, and I think a lot of advisors do it the same, but I can't speak for everyone. When we talk with somebody, it doesn't cost anything. We have a conversation, phone call, Zoom, in person. But a lot of people out there,
well, the risk ends up being on us.
Well, we got to do a good job, right?
We can build a plan. We can put our best foot forward. And if a client chooses to invest with us, they choose for the right reasons.
Because we're giving them the right solutions and asking the right questions.
Correct.
Not because, hey, it's a $2,000 minimum. Sometimes people see that and they're like, oh, yeah, that guy must be good. It's $2,000 to sit down with them, right? That's not always the case. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah. So
quick recap.
So great recap. Let's get into just some timely topics, what's going on and stuff like that. We do our minute by minute at the close of our show. So let's delve into that a little bit. And
I don't know what the final was, but my Syracuse guys were beating Duke earlier today. I didn't get a chance to watch the end of it, but March Madness is coming up, and big basketball and March fan, only college basketball. I don't like watching the NBA. Nothing against them. They're kind of crybabies, but big college basketball fan. Love watching them. Love watching the Cuse. I'm a former Cuse guy. I got to be there when they won their national championship. So, big fan of March Madness. It's coming up this month, so I'm excited to see it.
Well, and March is always, for me, enjoyable time because it's the start of mushroom season, and I like foraging mushrooms. And
no, nothing wrong with that, man.
Spring is a great time for it. Hopefully we get rid of the snow here, and we can start looking for some morels.
What our viewers don't know is that Mark was once a master chef and unbelievable chef at that. So kudos to you. And when you find mushrooms, I would actually like to eat some that you cook. So please invite me over when that happens.
Yes, and it's not as scary as you think finding wild mushrooms. So.
Yeah, I know. To the viewers out there, they're like, oh yeah, mushrooms. No, not those mushrooms, right? Just regular mushrooms.
So as always, let's give you some contact information where you can contact us.
Please.
Obviously, it's the Esley Group with Cetera Investors. You can find us at 43 British American Boulevard in Latham, 12110. 800-222-3202. 800-222-3202 is our number. And as always, you can find us at yourtimeyourmoney.net. And we did .net for your net worth. So feel free to log on, check out our other links to our shows, and find some timely topics that you can always educate yourself. So thank you so much for your time. And as always, your time and your money is important.
Your time, your money. Great job, Mark.